The SEAL thought she was just a nurse, until she took the rifle and changed everything. "You're shaking, darling. Put the gauze down before you hurt yourself," the man gritted out, his voice a jagged ruin of pain and arrogance. He lay on the metal table, blood pooling black in the dim kerosene light, staring up at her with eyes that had seen too much death to respect life. Julianne didn't blink. She didn't speak. She simply pressed the hemostat into the open cavity of his shoulder with surgical precision, watching his pupils dilate. "I'm not shaking, Lieutenant," she whispered, her voice like cracking ice. "That's the tremors of your own body going into shock. Now shut up and let me save the life you seem so intent on throwing away." The rain in the Valorosa Valley didn't fall. It hammered. It was a relentless, vertical ocean that turned the dirt roads into mud-slicked graves and drowned out the sound of anything approaching. For Elias Thorne, call sign Breaker, the rain was the only reason he was still alive. It masked his heat signature, muffled his boots, and washed away the trail of blood leaking from his left deltoid. He kicked open the door to the mission station, his MK-18 rifle raised with his good arm, the barrel sweeping the room. "Clear," he rasped, though there was no one to hear him. The structure was a repurposed colonial outpost, rotting wood and corrugated tin clinging to the side of a mountain in a country the UN had long since abandoned. Inside, it smelled of stale iodine, wet wool, and wood smoke. Elias collapsed against the doorframe, sliding down until his heavy boots hit the floorboards with a thud. He was a Tier 1 operator, a Navy SEAL trained to endure the unendurable, but the sniper round that had punched through his shoulder had clipped an artery. He was fading. "I wouldn't sit there if I were you. Draft coming under the door helps the mold grow." Elias jerked his head up, weapon snapping toward the shadows. She stood by a heavy oak table, wiping her hands on a rag. She was slight, drowning in a pair of grey scrubs that looked 2 sizes too big. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, messy knot, strands of chestnut falling over a face that was devoid of makeup and, disturbingly, devoid of fear. She looked like a librarian who had taken a wrong turn into a war zone. Soft, breakable. "Who are you?" Elias demanded, trying to keep the tremor out of his aim. "The person about to dig a 7.62 round out of your shoulder," she said, tossing the rag into a bucket. She walked toward him, not with the hurried panic of a civilian, but with a strange, fluid economy of movement. "Name's Julianne, and you're dripping mud on my clean floor." Elias scoffed, a wet, hacking sound. "I need a medevac. Radio, sat phone, now." "Storm knocked the comms tower out 3 days ago," Julianne said, kneeling beside him. She reached for his tactical vest. He slapped her hand away. "Don't touch the gear." She looked at him then. Her eyes were a startling, pale grey, like floodwater. "Lieutenant, you have maybe 20 minutes before you bleed out. You can die in full tactical rattle with your pride intact, or you can let me cut this vest off and maybe live to kill people another day. Your choice." Elias stared at her. He saw the trembling in her fingers. Slight. Barely there. Nerves, he thought. She's terrified. She's just a nurse stuck in the middle of nowhere, acting tough. He hated civilians in the field. They were liabilities. Baggage. If the militia that ambushed his team tracked him here, she would be just one more thing he had to protect. "Do it," he growled, dropping his head back against the wood. The next hour was a blur of agony. He refused the morphine. He needed to stay sharp, so he felt every slice of the scalpel, every scrape of metal against bone. He watched her through half-lidded eyes. She moved efficiently, but he noted the way she flinched when thunder cracked directly overhead. He saw the way she avoided looking at the gun he kept on his chest. Civilian, he thought again, the judgment heavy and final. She's going to get us both killed. When she was finished, she bandaged him tightly and washed her hands in a basin of cold water. Elias sat up, the room spinning. "You need to leave," he said, his voice stronger but still rough. "The men who shot me, they aren't standard militia. They're contractors, shadow company types. If they find me here, I have 3 patients in the back ward recovering from malaria," Julianne said, her back to him as she organized her instruments, "and a local woman in labor. I'm not going anywhere." Elias tried to stand, bracing himself on the table. "You don't understand. These men clean house. No witnesses." Julianne turned, holding a glass of water. Her expression was unreadable. "I understand perfectly, Lieutenant. But this is a neutral aid station. We have protections." Elias laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Protections? Out here? Sweetheart, the only protection in this valley is a full magazine and the will to use it. You think a red cross on the roof stops a Hellfire missile? You think it stops men like that?" He gestured vaguely at the door, at the darkness outside. "Drink," she said, shoving the glass into his hand. "You've lost fluids." He took it, glaring at her. "I'm securing the perimeter. Stay inside. Keep your head down. If you hear shooting, hide in the cellar." "We don't have a cellar," she replied quietly. "Then dig a hole," Elias muttered, limping toward the door. He paused, looking back at her. She looked so small against the backdrop of the darkened clinic, illuminated only by the flickering lantern. "Just stay out of my way, nurse." He missed the way her eyes narrowed as he turned his back. He missed the way her hand hovered over the table, not shaking, but steady as stone. The perimeter check was a disaster. Elias moved like a man wading through concrete. The loss of blood had sapped his explosive speed, leaving him sluggish and clumsy. The rain had intensified, turning the jungle surrounding the clinic into a roaring, chaotic void. He found a vantage point on a ridge overlooking the single dirt road leading up to the clinic. He scanned the tree line with his thermal scope. Nothing. The storm was cooling everything down, washing out the heat signatures. He keyed his radio again. Static, just the white noise of the atmosphere screaming. Damn it, his team was scattered. Bravo and Charlie were likely dead. The ambush had been perfect. Too perfect. They had walked into a kill box. Someone had sold them out. And now he was stuck babysitting a stubborn woman in a shack made of tinder. He made his way back to the clinic, soaked to the bone. As he approached the rear of the building, he saw movement near the generator shed. He froze, raising his rifle. It was Julianne. She was outside in the torrential downpour, wearing a heavy oilskin coat. She was kneeling by the diesel generator, a wrench in her hand. Elias lowered the weapon slightly, watching. The generator had been sputtering earlier. He expected her to be fumbling, crying, perhaps kicking it in frustration. Instead, she was working the fuel line with a focused intensity. She adjusted the intake valve, checked the glow plugs, and restarted the engine with a single, practiced pull of the cord. The hum of the generator steadied into a rhythmic purr. She stood up and wiped the grease from her hands onto her coat. Then she stopped. She didn't turn around, but her head tilted slightly to the left, toward the east ridge. Elias frowned. What is she doing? She stood perfectly still for 10 seconds, blending into the shadows, listening. Then she moved. Not walking, but shifting. A low, crouching run back toward the clinic's rear entrance. She moved silently across the gravel, stepping toe to heel to dampen the sound. Elias blinked, wiping rainwater from his eyes. For a second, she had looked like someone else. But then she tripped on the bottom step, catching herself on the railing with a gasp, and the illusion shattered. Clumsy, he thought. She got lucky fixing the jenny. He followed her inside. She was already in the main room, stripping off the wet coat. She looked at him, eyes wide. "You were outside," he accused. "The power was fluctuating," she said defensively. "I need electricity for the incubator if the baby comes early. You shouldn't be out there. You're a target." "I'm a nurse," she snapped, a rare flash of anger breaking through her calm facade. "I fix things, that's what I do. You break them, I fix them. That's the arrangement, isn't it?" Elias sat heavily on a crate, resting his rifle across his knees. "The arrangement is about to expire. I saw tracks on the east ridge. Not animals. Boots." Julianne went still. "How many?" "3, maybe 4. Scouts." Elias checked his magazine. "The main force won't be far behind. They're waiting for the storm to break so they can use night vision." "What do we do?" Her voice was small again. "I do what I do," Elias said, his face hardening into the mask of the operator. "I set traps. I funnel them. I kill them. And me? You barricade the door. You keep your patients quiet. And if they get past me..." He pulled a secondary weapon, a Sig Sauer P226 from his waistband and slid it across the table. "You use this." Julianne stared at the gun like it was a venomous snake. She didn't reach for it. "I can't," she whispered. "You can, or you die. It's that simple." She looked up at him, and for a moment Elias saw something profound in her expression. It wasn't fear. It was a deep, weary sorrow. It is never that simple, Elias. It was the first time she had used his name. It disarmed him more than the enemy fire had. "Take the gun," he ordered, harsher than he intended. She hesitated, then reached out with trembling fingers. She picked it up awkwardly, holding it with 2 hands, as if it weighed 50 pounds. She didn't check the chamber. She didn't check the safety. She just placed it in the pocket of her scrubs, the weight of it dragging the fabric down. Useless, Elias thought. Despair clawing at his gut. She won't even be able to take the safety off. "I made coffee," she said suddenly, pivoting to the stove. "It's terrible, but it's hot." Elias watched her pour the black liquid into tin mugs. The domesticity of the moment was jarring. Outside, death was gathering in the tree line. Inside, she was serving instant coffee. "Why are you here, Jules?" he asked, the nickname slipping out. "A woman like you? You could be in a private hospital in Zurich or London. Why this hellhole?" She paused, the steam rising around her face. "Penance," she said softly. "For what? For getting a sponge in a patient?" She turned, and the shadows cast by the lantern made her eyes look like hollow pits. Something like that. A crack of thunder shook the floorboards, but Elias knew the sound of thunder, and he knew the sound of a breach charge. This was the latter. "Get down!" he roared, tackling her as the front window exploded inward in a shower of glass and wet wood. The world turned into noise and dust. Elias rolled, covering Julianne's body with his own, shielding her from the debris. He felt the heat of the blast wave wash over them, smelling the acrid tang of C4 explosive. "Stay down!" he yelled into her ear. He scrambled to a crouching position, bringing his rifle up. The front door was gone, blown off its hinges. Through the gaping hole, green laser sights cut through the dusty air like lightsabers. Suppressive fire erupted. Bullets chewed through the wooden walls of the clinic, sending splinters flying like deadly confetti. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The sound of rounds impacting the interior was deafening. Elias returned fire, short, controlled bursts. He saw a shadow drop in the doorway. "One down. Back room! Go!" he screamed at Julianne. She was on the floor, curled in a ball, hands over her ears. She wasn't moving. Move! Elias grabbed her arm and dragged her across the floor. She scrambled up, stumbling, looking frantic. "The patients," she cried, "are dead if we don't hold this room." He shoved her behind the heavy oak desk he had been bleeding on an hour ago. He crouched beside her, changing magazines. His shoulder was screaming, the stitches surely tearing, warm blood soaking his bandage again. "Listen to me," he panted, locking eyes with her. "They are going to flank us. I need you to watch the rear door. Just watch it. If it opens, you scream. Can you do that?" She nodded, eyes wide, chest heaving. Just scream?" "Yes, now go." She crawled away toward the hallway that led to the back wards. Elias turned back to the breach. He popped up, fired 2 rounds, and ducked as a hail of bullets decimated the shelf of medical supplies above him. Glass vials shattered, raining morphine and antibiotics onto the floor. They're professional, Elias realized. They were using bounding Overwatch tactics. 1 moved while 2 fired. They were closing the distance. He checked his ammo. 3 mags left. Maybe 90 rounds. Against a squad of Tier 1 mercenaries. He was going to die here. He tossed a frag grenade through the open door, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Boom! A scream from outside. "Breaker!" A voice called out from the darkness, amplified by a megaphone. It was a deep, cultured voice. British accent. "Give it up, mate. We don't want the girl. We just want the hard drive you took from the crash site." Elias grit his teeth. He didn't have a hard drive. He had been on a recon mission. Intel was wrong again. "Come and get it, Silas," Elias yelled back, recognizing the voice. Silas Vane, ex-SAS. A gun for hire with a reputation for brutality that made the cartels look like choir boys. "Have it your way," Silas replied. The firing stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. It was the silence of a predator coiling its muscles. Elias scanned the room. He needed a better angle. He needed a sound from the back hallway, not a scream, a thud, a wet, heavy thud. "Jules," he hissed into his comms, realized he didn't have any, and cursed. "Julianne." No answer. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in his chest. He abandoned the front entrance, keeping his rifle trained on the hallway, and moved backward. If they had breached the rear. He reached the doorway to the back ward. It was dark. "Julianne?" "I'm here." Her voice came from the shadows. It sounded different. Steady. Elias swept his flashlight beam across the room. Julianne was standing by the rear door. The door was open, swinging in the wind. Lying at her feet was a man clad in black tactical gear, night vision goggles still strapped to his face. He was dead. A singular, precise puncture wound to the carotid artery. Julianne was holding a scalpel. It was dripping. Elias stared at the body, then at her. The mercenary was twice her size. He was armed with a silenced MP7. And she had stabbed him. "He surprised me," she said, her voice trembling slightly again. She dropped the scalpel as if it were hot. He came in and I swung my hand. Elias moved to the body, checking for a pulse. Nothing. The strike was surgically perfect. It had severed the artery and the windpipe. Instant incapacitation. He looked up at her. She was hugging herself, looking nauseous. Adrenaline, he told himself. Pure blind luck. A desperate flail that connected. "You did good," Elias said, though his gut was twisting with a suspicion he couldn't name. "You saved us." "I killed him," she whispered. "He was going to kill your patients." "I took an oath," she murmured, staring at her blood-stained hands. "Do no harm. That oath doesn't apply to rabid dogs." Elias grabbed the dead mercenary's MP7 and tossed it to the side. He didn't want her having a machine gun. She'd likely spray the room and hit him. "Come on, we have to move the patients. This room isn't safe." He turned his back to her to secure the door. Behind him, Julianne didn't move immediately. She looked at the dead man, then at the scalpel on the floor. She looked at Elias's exposed back. For a split second, the trembling ceased. She nudged the dead mercenary's boot with her toe, checking for a hidden ankle holster. She found a knife. With a sleight of hand that would have baffled a magician, she swept the knife up and into her waistband under her scrubs. "Coming, Lieutenant," she said, her voice pitching up into that frantic, civilian tone again. Elias locked the door and turned around. He was sweating profusely now. The blood loss was catching up. His vision blurred at the edges. "We need a choke point," he slurred slightly. The corridor. "Elias, you're pale." "I'm fine." He stumbled. She caught him. For a small woman, she was surprisingly strong. She braced him against the wall. "You're not fine. Your sutures have torn." "Doesn't matter. They're coming through the front. Any second." As if on cue, a canister smashed through the front window. It skittered across the floor, hissing. "Gas!" Elias coughed, trying to reach for his mask, but he didn't have it. He had left it in the jeep, which was now burning a mile down the road. White smoke filled the clinic rapidly. It wasn't lethal, but it was CS gas. Tear gas. "Don't breathe!" he choked out, eyes burning instantly. Julianne grabbed a towel, soaked it in water from a basin, and shoved it over his face. "Breathe through this." There. Breaching. Shadows moved in the smoke. The laser sights were back, cutting through the white haze. Elias raised his rifle, but his arms felt like lead. He fired blindly into the smoke. Bang! Bang! Return fire sparked off the wall inches from his head. "Get back!" He shoved Julianne toward the floor. He was losing consciousness. The gas, the blood loss, the shock. The weapon slipped from his grip. He slumped against the wall, sliding down. "No, no, no," he groaned. "Not like this." A figure emerged from the smoke. Tall, imposing, wearing a gas mask that looked like the snout of an insect. Osiris. The mercenary leader stepped over the debris, a pistol raised. He looked at Elias, then at Julianne, who was cowering beside the overturned table. "Pathetic," Silas said, his voice muffled by the mask. "The Great Breaker. Dying in a dirty clinic with a nursemaid." He aimed the gun at Elias's head. "Say good night, Lieutenant." Elias stared down the barrel. He had nothing left. No strength, no clever quip. He closed his eyes. Click. The sound of a safety being disengaged, but it didn't come from Silas's gun. It came from beside Elias. Elias opened his eyes. Julianne wasn't cowering anymore. She was standing. The tremors were gone. The fear was gone. Her posture had shifted, shoulders squared, weight forward, knees bent. In her hands, she didn't hold the gauze. She didn't hold the towel. She held the dead mercenary's MP7, which Elias had discarded. She held it not like a confused nurse, but like an extension of her own nervous system. The stock was tucked tight into her shoulder, her cheek welded to the weapon, her finger taking up the slack on the trigger. Silas turned his head, processing the threat too late. "You?" Silas said, a hint of recognition in his voice. "Me," Julianne said. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was the voice of death itself. Thwip thwip. 2 rounds. Subsonic. Silas's head snapped back. His gas mask shattered. He crumpled to the floor. Elias watched, his mouth falling open as the darkness took him. The last thing he saw was the nurse stepping over his legs, moving into the smoke, the rifle raised, hunting the rest of the pack. Elias didn't wake up. He surfaced. One moment he was drowning in a black sea. The next he was gasping for air, the metallic taste of adrenaline and old blood coating his tongue. He was alive. He sat up, his hand instinctively grasping for his sidearm. It was gone. "Easy, Lieutenant. You'll pop your stitches again." He turned his head. The clinic was a ruin. The front wall was shattered, wet leaves and rain blowing in across the debris. But the lanterns were still lit, casting long, wavering shadows against the blood-splattered walls. Julianne was sitting on a crate near the pot-bellied stove, stripping a Glock 19. Her movements were hypnotic. Slide off, spring out, barrel out. She wiped each piece with an oily rag, her face devoid of the frantic innocence she had worn just hours ago. "You," Elias croaked. His throat felt like he'd swallowed glass. "Water," she said, nodding to a canteen by his hip. "Drink." Elias ignored the water. He scanned the room. "Silas." "Dead," she said calmly, reassembling the pistol with a sharp clack-clack. "Along with 4 others. I dragged the bodies out back. The smell attracts scavengers." Elias stared at her. The woman in the oversized scrubs was gone. In her place sat someone else entirely. Someone who held a weapon not as a tool of defense, but as a limb. She had tied her hair back tighter, revealing a scar that ran behind her ear, faint and jagged. "Who are you?" Elias asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Because you sure as hell aren't a missionary nurse." She looked up, and the grey eyes were no longer like flood water. They were like steel. "Does it matter?" "You're alive." "It matters," Elias growled, struggling to his feet. The pain in his shoulder was a dull roar now, manageable. "You took out a 5-man hit squad with a scalpel and a scavenged submachine gun. That's not nursing school curriculum, that's Langley. Or worse." Julianne sighed, sliding the Glock into her waistband. She stood and walked over to him, checking his bandages with a professional detachment that now felt like a mockery. "Sit down, Breaker. You're bleeding through." He grabbed her wrist. Her skin was cool, her pulse steady. "Answer me. Silas knew you. He recognized you right before you put 2 in his brain pan." She didn't pull away. She didn't flinch. She just looked at his hand on her wrist, then up at his eyes. "Silas and I worked together, a long time ago, in a different life." "Doing what?" "Cleaning up messes," she whispered. "Now let go, or I will break your wrist. And in your condition, I won't even have to try very hard." Elias let go, not out of fear, but out of a sudden, chilling realization. He knew that tone. He had heard it in the voice of interrogators and assassins. It was the tone of someone who had buried their conscience in a shallow grave years ago. "You're Serafina," he breathed, the name surfacing from the depths of classified briefings he wasn't supposed to read. "The widow of Grozny. The ghost who wiped out the Petrov syndicate in 18. A flicker of emotion crossed her face. Regret. Amusement. It was gone too fast to tell. "I'm just Juliana," she said, turning back to her medical supplies. "Serafina died in a fire 3 years ago, or so the file says." Elias leaned back against the wall, his mind racing. He was trapped in a blown-out clinic in the middle of a hostile jungle with a woman who was technically a high-value target for half the intelligence agencies on the planet. "Why?" he asked. "Why play the nurse? Why hide here?" She paused, holding a roll of gauze. "Because I was tired, Elias. Tired of the noise, tired of the blood. I wanted to save lives for a change. I wanted to balance the ledger." She looked around at the ruin of her clinic. "I suppose some stains don't wash out. Silas wasn't here for the hard drive, was he?" Elias realized. "He was here for you." "No," Julianne said, her voice grim. "He was here for you. The hard drive is real. Whatever you stole, whatever intel you have, it's worth enough to hire a team like that. But now that I've intervened, now they'll send the second wave. And this time, they won't be looking for a hard drive. They'll be looking to liquidate the assets. Both of us. She tossed him a spare magazine she had scavenged. Load up, sailor. We're leaving. The jungle at night was a sensory overload, a cacophony of insects, rain, and the shifting of wet earth. But for Elias and Julianne, it was cover. They moved in silence. Elias was impressed despite himself. He was a SEAL, trained in stealth, but Julianne moved like smoke. She didn't break twigs. She didn't leave footprints. She flowed through the underbrush, her awareness expanding outward like a radar. "We need to head north," Elias whispered, favoring his left side. "Extraction point is at the river delta. 8 clicks." "Too obvious," Julianne countered, not breaking stride. "They'll have the river locked down. Satellites are back online now that the storm is passing. They'll see us on thermal if we hit the open water. So what's your plan? We live in the trees like monkeys?" "We go to the mines," she said. "Old copper mines in the western ridge. The tunnels lead out to the coast, underground, blocks thermal, confined spaces, nullifies their numbers advantage." Elias grunted. "You know the terrain better than I do. I've been hiding here for 3 years. I know every spider hole and deer trail." They stopped to rest near a rocky outcrop. Elias slumped against a mossy boulder, sweat stinging his eyes. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain was returning with a vengeance. Julianne knelt beside him, checking his vitals. Her touch was different now, less clinical, more tactical. She was assessing his combat readiness, not his health. "You're burning up," she noted. "Infection risk is high." "I'll live. Don't be a hero. Dead heroes are just heavy luggage." She handed him a protein bar. "Eat." He tore the wrapper with his teeth. "So, Serafina, or Julianne, whatever. You said you wanted to balance the ledger. Is that what I am? A charity case?" She sat opposite him, scanning the perimeter with the MP7. "You're a man who walked into a trap because his command hung him out to dry. I have a soft spot for betrayed soldiers." Elias chewed slowly. "You think I was set up? I know you were. Silas didn't just stumble upon you. He knew your extraction route. He knew your call sign. He knew you were alone. Someone inside your chain of command sold you out." Elias wanted to deny it. He wanted to defend the Brotherhood. But the ambush had been too precise. Why? Money? Power? The usual. Or maybe you saw something on that recon mission you weren't supposed to see. Elias thought back to the crash site he had investigated. A downed drone. Not American, not Russian. Something else. Tech he didn't recognize. He had pulled the drive, but hadn't looked at it. "I still have it." He tapped his chest pocket. "The drive." "Good. Keep it close. It's our insurance policy." Suddenly, Julianne froze. She held up a hand, fist clenched. "Stop!" Elias went rigid. She tilted her head, sniffing the air. "Ozone," she whispered. "What?" "Ozone and jet fuel." A low thrumming sound began to vibrate in Elias's chest. It grew louder, a deep, mechanical pulsating that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Drone," Elias hissed. "Reaper?" "Smaller," Julianne said, her eyes scanning the canopy. "Hunter-killer swarms. Stay down." She tackled him into the mud, pulling a thermal blanket from her pack and throwing it over them. It was intimate. Tight. He could smell her, rain, gunpowder, and a faint hint of lavender soap. Her breathing was slow, controlled against his chest. Whirr. The drones passed overhead, dozens of them, their rotors slicing the air like angry hornets. Searchlights pierced the canopy, sweeping the forest floor. Elias watched the beams cut through the leaves, inches from their hiding spot. If they moved, they were dead. If they gave off a heat signature, they were dead. He looked at Julianne. Her face was inches from his. In the terrifying claustrophobia of the moment, he saw the woman beneath the killer. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her lips moving in a silent prayer, or perhaps a count. She wasn't fearless. She was just better at managing fear than anyone he had ever met. The noise faded. The lights moved on. She waited a full 2 minutes before pulling the blanket back. They were both covered in mud. "That wasn't Shadow Company," Elias said, wiping slime from his face. "Mercs don't have autonomous swarms." "No," Julianne said, her expression dark. "That was something else. This goes deeper than a simple sellout, Elias. We've kicked a hornet's nest." She offered him a hand up. He took it. Her grip was iron. "The mines," she said. "We have to move. Now." The entrance to the copper mines was a gaping maw in the side of the mountain, overgrown with vines and smelling of sulfur. "Ladies first," Elias said, gesturing with his good arm. Julianne didn't smile. She clicked on a tactical light mounted to the MP7. "Watch your step. The floor is unstable." They moved into the cool, damp darkness. The silence here was absolute, heavy. It amplified the sound of their breathing and the drip of water from the stalactites. They had been walking for 20 minutes when Elias stumbled. His vision swam. He leaned against the rock wall, sliding down. "Breaker?" Julianne was at his side instantly. "Just dizzy," he mumbled. "Need a minute." "We don't have a minute." She checked his wound. It was hot to the touch. "You're septic. Damn it." She ripped open a med kit she had stolen from the mercenaries. "I have to give you a broad-spectrum antibiotic. It's going to hurt." She jammed a needle into his thigh. Elias hissed, his head falling back against the stone. "Talk to me," she ordered, working efficiently. "Keep your brain engaged. Tell me about home. Do you have a girl waiting for you? A dog?" "No girl," Elias gritted out. "Had a dog. Buster. Died last year. I'm sorry. What about you, Serafina? Any little assassins waiting at home?" She paused, her hands hovering over his bandages. For a second, the mask slipped completely. He saw a profound, aching loneliness in her eyes. "I had a daughter," she said softly. The words echoed in the tunnel. "Maya. She would have been 6 this year." Elias went quiet. "What happened?" "The life happened," she said, bitter and sharp. "I thought I could keep them separate. I was wrong. The fire. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. That's why you left." "That's why I died," she corrected. "Serafina died in that house with her baby. Julianne is just the ghost that wandered away." Elias looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the tragedy that fueled the lethality. She wasn't fighting to survive. She was fighting because she had nothing left to lose, and that made her the most dangerous thing in the world. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it. "Don't be. Just survive. That's all the penance I get." She helped him stand. The intimacy of the moment lingered, a heavy tension in the air. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was recognition. 2 broken things finding jagged edges that fit. "Movement," she whispered suddenly, killing the light. Elias froze. Ahead in the tunnel darkness, a red light blinked. A proximity mine, and behind them, the sound of boots on gravel. "They're in the tunnels," Elias whispered. "They beat us here." "No," Julianne said, her mind working furiously. "They didn't beat us. They knew we were coming. The mine, it's fresh." She turned to him, her eyes wide in the dark. "Elias, the hard drive. Give it to me." "What? Why?" Because it's tracking us. It's not just storage. It has a transponder. That's how they found the clinic. That's how the drones found us. That's how they knew to mine this tunnel. Elias pulled the drive from his pocket. It was a small, unassuming rectangle of metal, a blinking blue light on the side, so faint he hadn't noticed it before, pulsed in time with his heartbeat. "Son of a bitch," he whispered. "Throw it," she commanded. "Down the shaft. Now." Elias wound up and hurled the drive into a deep, vertical mining shaft to their left. It clattered against the walls, falling. Boom! An explosion rocked the tunnel from below. The drive had been rigged to blow remotely. They tried to detonate it, Elias realized, dust raining down on them. They realized we were onto it. "They're close," Julianne said, bringing the MP7 up. "And now they know exactly where we are." From the darkness ahead, a voice echoed, distorted, metallic, amplified by speakers built into a heavy combat suit. "End of the line, Serafina." Julianne stiffened. "Who is that?" Elias asked. "That," she said, racking the bolt of her weapon, "is the man who lit the match." A figure stepped into the dim light of the tunnel intersection ahead. He was massive, encased in prototype ballistic armor that looked like something out of a nightmare. A heavy rotary cannon hung from his arm. "Kharkov," she breathed. The armored figure laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "You look good for a corpse, little bird. I see you found a new pet." He spun the barrel of the cannon. "Run," Julianne said to Elias. Not a request, an order. "Not without you," Elias replied, drawing the knife she had given him. He felt the rush of the fight, the clarity of the doom. "Then we die together," she said. "Works for me." Elias grinned, blood on his teeth. "I never liked retirement anyway." Kharkov opened fire. The tunnel exploded in light and noise. The tunnel dissolved into a storm of granite shards and deafening noise. Kharkov's rotary cannon didn't just fire, it chewed. It ate through the support beams and pulverized the rock face, turning the narrow corridor into a choking cloud of dust. Elias dove right, hitting the ground hard, rolling behind a rusted mine cart. Bullets sparked off the metal, ringing like church bells in hell. "Move left!" Julianne screamed from the darkness. She wasn't pinning Kharkov down, she was herding him. She fired short, stinging bursts at the armored giant's visor, forcing him to flinch, to adjust his aim. It was like throwing pebbles at a tank, but it bought them seconds, and seconds were the currency of the damned. "He's got thermal!" Elias yelled, coughing up dust. "Smoke won't hide us." "I know!" she yelled back. "That's why we're not hiding." Julianne broke cover, sprinting not away from the juggernaut, but toward him. "Jules, no!" Elias roared, scrambling to get a firing angle. Kharkov laughed, the sound amplified by his suit speakers. He swiveled the cannon toward the charging woman. "Come to Papa, little bird." Julianne slid on her knees, the friction tearing her scrub pants, sliding directly under the barrel of the rotary gun, just as it spun up. She wasn't aiming for the man. She was aiming for the floor. She slapped a slap charge, something she must have lifted from the dead mercenaries at the clinic, onto the rusted rail tracks directly beneath Kharkov's heavy boots. "Breaker, the ceiling!" she shrieked, rolling away into a side fissure. Elias understood instantly. The mine wasn't just unstable, it was a loaded gun. He raised the MP7 he had snatched from the ground and fired, not at Kharkov, but at the rotting timber beams directly above the giant's head. Crack. Snap. The explosion of the slap charge weakened the floor. The bullets shattered the supports. Gravity did the rest. With a groan that sounded like the earth itself was in pain, the ceiling collapsed. Tons of rock, shale, and ancient machinery crashed down. Kharkov looked up, his laughter cutting off instantly. The floor gave way beneath him. The armor that made him invincible made him too heavy to save. He fell backward into the dark abyss of the lower shaft, buried under a landslide of his own making. The roar of the collapse went on for 10 seconds, shaking the teeth in Elias's skull. Then, silence. Dust hung in the air, thick as soup. "Jules," Elias called out, his voice cracking. A hand emerged from the dust cloud, coughing. He grabbed it and pulled her up. She was grey with pulverized rock, blood trickling from her nose, but her eyes were burning with a terrifying triumph. "He's gone," she whispered, looking into the pit. "The man who burned my house. He's gone." "We need to go too," Elias said, urging her forward. "That collapse is going to bring down the whole mountain." They scrambled up a ventilation shaft, climbing rusted ladders that groaned under their weight. The air grew thinner, cooler. They climbed until their muscles screamed, until Elias's vision tunneled down to a pinprick. And then they broke surface. They collapsed onto wet grass, the night sky above them vast and indifferent. The rain had stopped. The moon was out, painting the ocean below in silver. "We made it," Elias gasped, rolling onto his back. Julianne didn't answer. She was staring at the horizon, where the dark shapes of ships sat on the water. "Not yet," she said. "The hard drive. Elias, I lied." Elias propped himself up on one elbow. "What?" "I didn't just throw it down the shaft to destroy it. I swapped it." She reached into her boot and pulled out the small metallic rectangle. "I threw a flare casing. I kept the drive." Elias stared at it. "Why?" "It's a tracking beacon. You said so yourself." "I disabled the transponder while you were passed out," she said. "But the data. Elias, if we destroy this, we survive. But if we keep it, we can kill them all. Not just the soldiers. The men who sign the checks. The crown." Elias looked at the drive, then at her. He saw the hunger in her eyes. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about war. "You want to use it," he said. "I want to burn their world down," she replied. "Will you help me? Or do you walk away?" Elias looked at his bloodied hands. He looked at the woman who had saved his life 3 times in one night. He thought about the command that had left him to die. He took the drive from her hand. "Let's burn it down." They stole a boat, a smuggler's skiff hidden in the mangroves, and headed down the coast, not to the extraction point, but to a location only Serafina knew. It was a modern architectural marvel of glass and steel perched on a cliff edge overlooking the crashing waves. A safe house, technically owned by a shell corporation that no longer existed. "The ghost house," Julianne murmured as they broke the lock. "I built this for when I wanted to disappear. I never got to use it." Inside it was pristine. Dust sheets covered Italian leather furniture. The panic room in the basement was stocked with weapons, cash, and medical-grade supplies. For 2 days, they didn't speak of war. They healed. Julianne stitched Elias's shoulder properly this time, her hands gentle, the tremor gone completely. Elias watched the perimeter, though no one came. They existed in a bubble of stolen time. On the second night, the tension that had been building since the clinic finally broke. Elias found her on the balcony, staring at the ocean, wearing one of her old silk robes she had dug out of storage. The contrast between the lethal operator and this vision of elegance was jarring. "You can't go back to being a nurse," Elias said, standing beside her. "Not after this. And you can't go back to the teams," she countered, not looking at him. "We're dead, Elias. Both of us. The moment we kept that drive, we became ghosts." "I don't mind being a ghost," he said, stepping closer. "As long as I'm not haunting this place alone." She turned to him. The steel in her eyes melted. She reached up, tracing the line of his jaw. I'm dangerous, Breaker. Everyone I love ends up in ash. I'm fireproof, he whispered. He kissed her. It wasn't tentative. It was a collision, a desperate affirmation of life in the face of so much death. It was the taste of rain and iodine and survival. They held on to each other like anchors in a storm, the lines between protector and protected, nurse and soldier, blurring until there was only the man and the woman. But the morning brought the world back in. Elias woke to the sound of typing. Julianne was at the computer terminal in the panic room, the drive plugged in. I cracked it, she said, her voice hollow. Elias rubbed the sleep from his eyes. And? It's not intel, Elias. It's a ledger, a list of every black budget operation authorized by the Joint Chiefs in the last decade. Assassinations, coups, illegal arms deals. It implicates everyone. Your admiral, my old handlers, the vice president. Elias stared at the screen. The names scrolling past were men he had saluted, men he had killed for. If we release this, Elias said slowly, the government collapses. Chaos. If we don't, Julianne said, they keep killing people like us. They keep burning houses with children inside. She hovered her finger over the enter key. They're here, Elias said suddenly. He didn't hear them. He felt them. The pressure change in the air, the silence of the birds. He looked at the security monitors. Black SUVs were swarming the cliff road. A helicopter was rising from the sea line. They found us, Julianne whispered. They tracked the decryption key. It was a trap inside the drive. How many? Too many. Elias checked his weapon. Full mag, one spare. Upload it, he said. Julianne looked at him. It will take 5 minutes. They'll breach in 2. Then I'll buy you 3, Elias said, walking to the door. Elias, wait. She grabbed his arm. You can't hold them off alone. It's suicide. He smiled, a sad, crooked thing. I told you, I'm a liability. You're the asset. You change the world, Jules. I just clear the path. No, she said, tears welling up. We do this together, or we don't do it. There's only one way out of this room, Jules, and one of us has to guard it. He kissed her forehead, pulled his arm free, and stepped into the hallway. He hit the button to seal the blast door behind him. Elias! She screamed, pounding on the reinforced steel. 5 minutes, Serafina, he yelled back. Make it count. The hallway was a funnel of death. Elias overturned a heavy marble table, using it as cover. He took a deep breath. Focus. Front sight. Squeeze. The front doors exploded. Flashbangs rolled in. Elias closed his eyes, counting the bang, then popped up. Pop up. Pop up. 2 men in black tactical gear dropped. Contact front, a voice yelled. Heavy fire chewed up the walls. Elias stayed low, moving, firing, moving again. He was a whirlwind. He wasn't fighting for a flag anymore. He was fighting for the 5 minutes, ticking down on the other side of that door. He took a round to the leg. He grunted, rolled, and returned fire. Another round clipped his ear. 3 minutes. They were pushing harder. Shields. Gas. Elias fell back to the stairs. He was bleeding from 3 places now. His vision was swimming. Give it up, Breaker, a voice boomed. There's nowhere to go. I'm not going anywhere, Elias roared, tossing his last grenade. The explosion shook the house. Glass shattered everywhere, raining down like diamonds. 2 minutes. He was out of ammo for the rifle. He drew his pistol. He could hear them coming up the stairs. He looked back at the sealed blast door. He hoped she was typing. He hoped she was burning it all down. The door to the panic room hissed. Elias spun around, gun raised. Jules, I said keep it shut! The door opened, but Julianne wasn't at the computer. She was standing there, holding a detonator. "I didn't upload it," she said, her voice calm amidst the chaos. Elias stared at her, horror and confusion warring in his chest. "What? Why?" "Because they'll just kill the next person who reads it. The world doesn't change, Elias. It just turns." She walked out to him, ignoring the bullets whizzing past. She stood beside him behind the cover of the stairwell. "What did you do?" "I wired the house," she said, holding up the detonator. "The gas lines, the C4 in the armory, all of it. Jules. They want the ghost? They get the ghost. They want the soldier? They get the soldier. But they don't get us." The tactical team reached the top of the stairs. 20 guns pointed at them. "Drop the weapon!" the lead operator screamed. Julianne looked at Elias. She took his hand, interlacing her fingers with his. Her palm was warm. Her pulse was steady. "Do you trust me?" she asked. Elias looked at the encroaching death squad. He looked at the woman who had brought him back to life, just to lead him to the end. "With my life," he said. "Good," she smiled. "Because we're not dying today." She didn't press the button. She threw the detonator at the feet of the lead soldier. He flinched, looking down. In that split second of distraction, Julianne pulled a lever on the wall. Not an explosive trigger, but a release mechanism. The floor beneath them, a false trapdoor built for the panic room's emergency exit, dropped away. They fell. As they plummeted into the darkness of the laundry chute that led to the sea caves below, the soldier panicked and fired at the detonator on the floor. Boom! The glass house erupted. A fireball the size of a sun consumed the cliffside. The structure disintegrated, sending tons of concrete and steel crashing into the ocean. To the watching world and the black helicopters circling above, nothing could have survived that inferno. The SEAL and the nurse were vaporized. The ledger was closed 3 months later. A small cafe in a cobblestone alleyway in Valparaiso, Chile. The sun is warm, smelling of salt and empanadas. A man with a limp and a new scar on his cheek sits reading a newspaper. He wears sunglasses, but his posture is unmistakably military. A woman approaches the table. She wears a sundress, her hair loose and flowing, the severe bun gone forever. She places 2 coffees on the table. "Did you see?" she asks, nodding at the paper. The headline reads, "Anonymous leak exposes global corruption ring. Government officials resign en masse." "I saw," the man says, smiling. "Someone must have uploaded that data before the house blew. Someone must have set a timer," she winks, sipping her coffee. "To the ghosts," Elias says, raising his cup. "To the living," Julianne corrects him, intertwining her fingers with his. "They aren't safe. They never will be. But they are free. They found a love that was forged in blood and tempered in fire, a bond strong enough to defy the crown that commanded them and the curse that haunted them. They are no longer the weapons of other men. They are their own destiny. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Let me know in the comments, would you have uploaded the data or burned it all down? Until next time, keep reading.